In the ancient city where time seemed to have stopped, Fernando felt like he was in a fairy tale. The ruins towered several stories high, covered in foliage, and between the crumbling stone walls, lush vines grew. The light of the sunset bathed everything in golden rays, creating an atmosphere of magic and mystery. At that moment, as Fernando thoughtfully examined the carvings on a stone, his attention was drawn to the figure of a girl. She stood nearby, dressed in a light dress made of natural fabrics that disregarded the latest fashion trends. Her hair was dark and wavy, and her face shone with a sincere, open smile. It was Maria. Fernando approached her, and his heart fluttered. Maria stood among the ruins, which she knew well because she had grown up in them. She looked at him warmly and directly asked what he was doing. Her voice was melodic, and Fernando immediately felt that a special connection was forming between them. "I am an archaeologist," he replied a little shyly, focusing on her shining eyes. "I'm exploring the history of this wonderful place." Maria laughed and, coming closer, showed him places that held meaning for her people. She spoke of ancient rituals that took place here, of the people who once walked these streets, of love and loss that were part of her heritage. Each of her stories unveiled a new facet of life to Fernando. They explored unknown corners together, old temples hidden in dense thickets, and mosaics that had survived in the shadows of towering trees. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Fernando and Maria shared their dreams, hopes, and fears. Fernando admired her passion for her culture, and she, in turn, was impressed by his knowledge and enthusiasm. As time passed, during the nights beneath the starry sky, their gazes began to meet more often, and gradually a romance blossomed between them. Fernando noticed how the touch of their hands became more meaningful, and the moment when their lips almost touched hung in the air, filled with a tantalizing excitement. But ahead of them loomed a troubling choice. Fernando knew that his duty required him to return to the scientific world, but in his heart grew the desire to stay with Maria, exploring not only the ancient ruins, but also the unexplored depths of their love. As time went on, their old tale, filled with unforeseen moments, began to unfold, leaving behind traces leading into the unknown. Maria was the embodiment of the living culture of her people. Every movement she made radiated the energy that had been preserved in her ancestors. When she spoke, her voice sounded like a melody echoing from the depths of ages, filling her words with emotion and significance. Maria's dark, bright eyes sparkled like stars in the night sky, imbued with secrets and stories that would forever remain in her heart. One day, sitting on the crumbling wall of an ancient temple, she began to share with Fernando the tales of the creators of the world. She revealed to him the myth of a god who created people from the earth, endowing them with a soul and an immediate awareness of the beauty of the surrounding world. Each story she told seemed like a living painting unfolding before him, and Fernando felt his heart beating in sync with the rhythms of this magnificent heritage. Maria also showed him ancient rites tied to nature. Together, they watched as local inhabitants performed ceremonies honoring the changing of seasons. Maria danced accompanied by the sound of flutes, and Fernando, captivated, noticed how her movements gently intertwined with the rhythms created around them. In those moments, he was immersed in the infinite world of her culture, losing all sense of time. During their conversations, they both discovered the essence of everyday life. Maria spoke about her people's customs, morning rituals that began with sun prayers, about the natural foods prepared from local ingredients, and about the warmth of the community that reinforced their connection to the past. Fernando observed how her face lit up at the mention of family traditions. She proudly showed him exquisite patterns passed down through generations, filling the room with the scents of spices and flowers. This deep attachment to her culture completely captivated Fernando. Each new, meaningful moment spent with Maria intensified his feelings, and an unexpected yet powerful passion ignited between them. They spent hours discussing the past, dreaming about the future, and relishing every moment and every unspoken word. The distance between them vanished when their hands accidentally touched, when they both laughed, feeling that communication occurred at a level of the soul that was uniquely understood by them. Maria became for Fernando not only a guide in her world, but also a mirror, reflecting his own desires and unspoken words. However, in Fernando's heart, anxiety blossomed. He knew that his responsibilities were pulling him back into the world of science, where the emotions and values of his love might seem insignificant. And as the passion between them grew, so did the chasm that they both dared to look at, though neither of them perceived it as a threat. They were immersed in each other, and their dialogues resembled the last chords of a song filled with melancholy and beauty, an unhappy but unforgettable love. Each day spent together was an incredible adventure for Fernando and Maria. They explored the narrow streets of the ancient city, where every house, every stone, and every detail told its own story. Maria took Fernando to small restaurants where traditional dishes were prepared with love. Together, they savored fragrant tomato sauces with aromatic rice, fresh seafood baked with herbs, and local desserts made with honey and nuts that melted in their mouths. Each new dish became a symbol of their shared experience, infused with love and gratitude. Their nights were spent under the starry sky, which seemed as eternal as their feelings. They talked about their dreams, fears, how their lives would affect their families, and how they both experienced this incredible connection. Fernando shared his professional ambitions, recounting his research, while Maria revealed to him the depths of her culture, filled with warmth and traditions. Their cultural differences became a source of inspiration, and they created something entirely new and beautiful, a mosaic of two worlds. But with each new day, it became clearer that this fairy tale could not last forever. The different extremes of their lives began to weigh on them, and the time that remained was rapidly dwindling. When Fernando learned that his obligations in his hometown required his return, he felt a heavy burden descend upon him. Maria had become not just a friend, but a part of his soul. Thus, the news of his return saddened him. That evening, when Fernando decided to tell Maria of his intentions, he noticed how her face changed, from joyful and bright to empty, filled with fear. Maria, aiming to preserve what they had built, took his hand. Her voice trembled, but there was determination in it. "Stay, Fernando," she pleaded. "I can't imagine how I will live without you. You have shown me a world I never dreamed of. You have opened doors to a new life for me, and I don't want to close them again." Each of her words struck deeply at his heart. He felt her sincerity overflowing him. An inner struggle ignited, to leave everything he knew or to return to the familiar world. "I promise to come back," he said, trying to encourage her. "For the first time in my life, I have the opportunity to immerse myself in your stories and your culture. But I must finish what I am doing. I can't leave it all unfinished." Hearing this promise, Maria held back her panic and tried to be strong, but soon her eyes filled with tears. She felt their connection becoming increasingly fragile under the pressure of reality. Fernando tried to reassure her, but in his heart, anxiety had already taken root. He knew that every promise, no matter how true it was, could collapse at the edge of distance. They sat together, enveloped in contemplation and shadows that fell upon their shoulders. In that darkness, they felt the silence looming between them, filled with unspoken words and emotions. The night around them became more and more boundless, and the stars, which once seemed a symbol of their love, now reminded them of the inevitable distance. Fernando, holding Maria's hand, tried to find words that might dispel her fear. He knew that their days together had been filled with happiness, but the immediate reality pressed upon their shoulders like a heavy stone. "I will always be in your heart," he said, trying to reassure both himself and her. "You taught me to appreciate life and culture. I promise that this experience will always remain with me." Maria, wiping away her tears, understood that their love had become something greater than just feelings. It had become a shared story that they were writing together. But in her eyes, he saw the fear of loss that haunted not only her but him as well. They both knew that the promises made in their relationship had become increasingly fragile. "I will wait for you, Fernando. I will try to keep my heart open while you are far away," she said, her voice softening as she spoke about the future. He couldn't help but feel that the distance between them was becoming something tangible, a thick wall made of uncertainty and fear. Fernando realized that despite their love, reality required them to make a choice. When the morning star arrived and the first rays of sunlight broke through the windows overlooking the ancient ruins, Fernando knew it was time to go. The farewell became heavy, like an endless void in their hearts. They embraced, and this hug became a promise of hope for them. Fernando felt a heavy boulder settle on him as he said, "I will return," but deep down, he knew that the world he would return to would be completely different without Maria. Perhaps this love, so bright and true, had become a chosen one for them, beautiful but not decisive. After the end of this story, only memories remained, which they would later try to piece together in an effort to preserve the fragile beauty of their endeavors. But in each of their hearts would flare the realization that sometimes the dearest things in the world, despite all efforts, simply lose their form. As the plane ascended into the air, Fernando fixed his gaze on the window, watching as the small town gradually shrank to the size of a child's model. The memory of Maria and their shared days lived in his heart, and with each passing moment, the distance between them became increasingly insurmountable. His heart squeezed with sorrow as he recalled their evenings under the stars, the touch of hands in silence, and the smiles they exchanged while watching the sunsets. Now, in the silence of the airplane, he felt how all of it faded away, like the small details of the ancient city that remained behind. Maria was his light, his inspiration, but now he had left her among the ruins that stored the memories of their feelings, like walls covered in moss that still bore the weight of history. On the ground, Maria found herself alone, her heart filled with hopelessness and longing. She stood on the old promenade where she and Fernando had often walked, listening to the whisper of the waves, which once brought them euphoria. And now those same sounds became a call to memories. The space around her felt vast and empty, and the ancient city no longer looked as lively and bright. She felt as if she had fallen into shadow, walking down the same streets that once filled with the joy of their love. Fernando tried to continue his life, but everything seemed meaningless without Maria. In the backdrop of scientific research and dedication to his work, memories of her always surfaced. He was in the laboratory, but his thoughts often wandered back to the workshop where she had taught him to create traditional crafts, her hand gently picking colors from the paints. This was what embodied true magic. Every object he saw prompted nostalgia, reminding him of what he had lost. The love that could have become something real was only a remnant of a broken heart. It remained on the ancient land, strewn with memories of their shared dreams, of playful conversations, of glances that always smiled at each other well enough to understand without words. At a time when the past had become just a smoldering memory, Fernando and Maria searched for ways to fill the endless chasm. They both immersed themselves in their work, trying to find solace, but to no avail. Their hearts, despite the distance, were filled with emotions that could not be extinguished. The love that connected them became a dazzling art, enchanting yet unattainable. Like in ancient legends, they were left with a sense of a lost treasure, lavishly celebrated by history, but one that could never be truly grasped.